Hello, my name is Joshua Michaels, and this is my final presentation for my Introduction to Education class. Um, so for my final presentation, I decided to discuss the topic of standardized testing. And this was a subject that, an area of education that I'm interested in personally, mostly because, I've taken these tests many times, elementary school, middle school, high school, I've taken SATs, and I know how frustrating, it can be. Um, it's something. So um, so these are some examples of some standardized tests. These are some popular ones. ACT, SAT, the GMAT. Then you have general education development, which is the GED. High school equivalent. National Assessment of Educational Process. That's your basic one for assessing children in elementary, middle school. And these are some basic standardized tests. So I'm sure we've all taken them at some point or another. Okay, so a standardized test is an assessment that contains all of the exact same questions for all the test takers at a certain time, possibly for a certain subject or multiple subjects, or a set of similar questions. Tests like these are also scored exactly the same way so that it's consistent from test taker to test taker. So, essentially, it's a test that everyone takes. It has multiple. Can have multiple subjects, or specifically chooses one subject, and it's all the same. Um, and the purpose of the standardized test is so we compare the results because everyone is taking these tests. Um, its purpose is to compare the scores of students from school to school all over the country and be able for the school to measure how much a student has actually learned from the curriculum. So it's one of the purposes to compare um, the results of one test from student to student because of both things they want to see if one is learning more than the other, how and and another purpose of these tests is also to evaluate the teachers and make sure they're actually teaching the students what they need to know. Um, okay, so now I'll get through more of the purposes, but this is one thing I'd like to discuss: the problems with standardized testing. Now there is quite a lot of problems. I went through my research. It was actually difficult to find the good side. There is a good side, but it was difficult to find, what was positive about standardized testing. There's a lot of evidence against it. So one of the big problems is that these tests are supposed to measure intelligence and measure if the student is learning what needs to be learned. And well, the first off is that there's no intelligence being tested, mostly because intelligence is subjective and not objective. It's very there's many kinds of intelligences, but not even that. It doesn't even measure a specific kind of intelligence. It just measures if you studied, essentially, if you whether or not you studied or not, and that's not a good indicator of whether or not a student will do well. That's the problem with SATs. The SATs actually got sued because their original name was the Student Aptitude Test, I believe, or I'm sorry, the Standard Aptitude Test, and they were sued because they weren't measuring for any aptitudes, and they lost. But so eventually they just changed their name to completely SATs. Anyway, which doesn't stand for anything. But anyway, okay. Another problem is there's certain monetary reasons. A school might go out of its way to try and teach. They're essentially they're going to go out of their way to obtain the monetary benefits of these tests, because as long as the test passes, then they'll get, as long as the school overall passes, then they'll get the funding from the state. So it's become very, they've gone very, they want money essentially. Um, and there's companies making like millions of dollars from printing these tests for no reason. Well, not for no reason, but I mean they have to print the tests, but they're making money from these tests, which way more money than they would if these weren't standard procedures, these tests. And that is believed to be a big reason as to why these tests are so like they emphasize the importance of these tests. The the people who are for the tests are the government, and then there's the difficulty. These tests, depending on what it is, the tests are more difficult, tend to be more difficult, well, in certain situations than they are supposed to be. There's this thing that some adults would even fail some of these tests. They would completely fail them. These are tests that 10-year-olds, 7-year-olds are taking. Actually, it goes as low as 6-year-olds. 6-year-olds are being tested, which is actually uncommon compared to other countries. Most countries, for their tests, they wait till kids turn 16. We start at 6, and that's very and that's very young, very very young for what it is. It's what some would consider unfair. And another issue is that the teachers are teaching instead of teachers used to be like more creative with their with teaching. They used to be more they used to have more freedom to choose their own curriculum. Now, because they need to do well on the tests, for their own sake or for the school's sake, they basically just teach the kids what the tests are, and that's sad because teachers should have the option to have their creativity shown and teach kids how they feel would be the best. And then another thing about this is the objective measures that they're trying to teach. I mean, there's no wiggle room with that. It's either it is or it isn't. And these tests are too objective. It's too broad. They need subjective tests. They need specific things. It's just science, reading, math for the most part, and there's a lack of creativity. It's unfair to the students who are being treated, who are they could be really good at art or something. It takes away from the creativity, and this is their time where they should be exploring these things. Another issue is when kids take these tests, and maybe they'll fail because maybe they just guess because they're too young to understand how important these tests are. They could be put in special education, and that's not right because they don't belong there. Just because they didn't do well on these tests, it's very hard to get out once you get in special education. But they won't take you out unless it's very hard. And this is something I actually understand very well. And like I said before, the teacher doesn't have they have to change the curriculum to just pass the tests. And like I said before, the teachers are being evaluated based on these tests, so it's hard for them as well. And these are just many of the problems. Then you have the good side of standardized testing. Essentially, they do what they're supposed to do. They were designed to test to test a student's ability objectively, and it does do that. And, in some cases it does actually work. If a student actually does need that kind of help from special education, then the test will show that. So, it does work to an extent, but there's too much. It's simply just too much, uh, out there. It's not this is not a good system that we have in place here for this. Oh, sorry. Now, but overall, though, from what I researched, like I said, it seems that there's a lot of evidence against standardized testing, and it just has too many flaws. It doesn't do the job well. So in the end, it's my hope that we'll be able to come up with a better system for evaluating our students and teachers and improving the students' ability to learn the best that they can. So thank you. That was my final presentation. Yeah.